The storm drove her to his porch. But love let her stay. Rain came sideways across the plains, slapping the windows hard enough to rattle the glass. Elias Monroe set his coffee down and glanced at the door, though no one ever came this far out unless they were lost or running. Thunder cracked like a rifle shot overhead, and just as he reached for the lantern, there it was. A knock. Sharp, hesitant. A pause. Then again. He opened the door slow, hand resting on the butt of his pistol. But what stood there wasn't danger. It was a girl, barely grown, soaked straight through and trembling from somewhere deeper than cold. Her dress clung like wet paper. Mud streaked her legs, and her bare feet were bleeding. Her hair hung in ropes over her face, and her eyes, God, her eyes looked hollowed out, like something had crawled inside her soul and died there. She didn't speak. Elias didn't ask. He stepped back. She stepped in. Water pooled under her where she stood, unsure if she was welcome or just lucky. He handed her a towel and nodded toward the hearth. She moved like every joint hurt. He stoked the fire, ladled stew into a tin bowl, and set it on the table without a word. She didn't thank him, just ate like a creature who hadn't touched food in days. When she finally curled up by the fire, wrapped in one of his old blankets, he sat in the wooden chair across the room and watched the flames. The storm beat against the walls. She didn't speak, didn't cry. And Elias, who'd once lived through a war, knew better than to ask what kind of storm had driven her here. Some storms don't leave tracks you can follow. Just wreckage that learns how to walk. The rain slowed to a hush, but the wind kept screaming. Inside, it was warm, quiet, thick with the smell of smoke and potatoes. She sat near the fire, knees pulled tight to her chest, steam rising from her damp dress. Her face was blotched and raw, not from weeping, but from whatever came before the storm. Elias didn't ask. He moved slow, careful not to crowd her. Set a kettle to boil, added more wood to the flames. The cabin didn't hold much, just a table, a cot, and that old creaking rocker, but it held peace, and maybe that was more than she'd had in a long while. She ate steady, spoon scraping gentle against tin. She didn't look up, didn't ask where she was or whose roof she'd found. Lightning flashed through the single window, lighting her face for a moment. Cheekbone bruised, lip cracked, jaw set like stone. She'd been through something. The kind of thing that leaves a person hollow on the inside, yet still standing. He didn't touch her. Didn't speak. Just unrolled a wool blanket and laid it out on the floor by the stove. Then he took his seat by the window, same as every night, hat tipped forward like it might keep the past from creeping in. She curled up without a word. The fire crackled. Thunder rolled in the distance, softer now. And in that stillness, Elias watched the girl close her eyes and breathe slow, like she didn't quite believe she was safe but wanted to try pretending anyway. No name was given. No questions hung in the air. Some nights don't need words. They just need walls that hold and silence that doesn't hurt. By morning, the sky was clear and cruelly bright, as if the night before had been a dream. But the girl was still there, sitting on the porch step, Elias's old mug between her hands, steam curling into the cool air. Her eyes didn't meet his when he stepped outside, just tracked the open land like it might rise up and swallow her if she blinked. He offered her bread, thick with butter. She took it, ate it slow. He waited. After a while, she said, "I'm just passing through." Her voice was low, flat, like it hadn't been used in some time, like it was borrowed. He nodded once. That was all. She didn't say where she came from, didn't say where she was headed, but when she reached up to brush the hair from her face, the sleeve of her dress shifted, and Elias saw it. The bruises, dark and yellowed, stretched like fingerprints across her arm. He didn't stare, didn't flinch, just looked past her to the hills. Some folks talked too much when they saw pain, tried to fill it with words or pity or half-spoken prayers. Elias had learned the hard way. Some wounds only start healing when nobody tries to name them. She didn't give a name, and he didn't ask again. He handed her a hammer when he started fixing the barn door. She took it. stood beside him in silence as wood met iron and the wind hummed through the cracks. There were stories she wasn't ready to tell, but her hands were steady, her back straight, and Elias figured that was enough, for now. Whatever name she once carried didn't matter. What mattered was she hadn't walked away. Not yet. By dawn, she was already moving, barefoot, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair still damp from the night before. Elias watched from the porch, coffee in hand, as she lifted the fallen shutter and began hammering it back into place. She didn't ask where the tools were. She'd already found them. The nails bent once, then held. Her hands weren't soft like most women's. There were calluses beneath the grime, signs of someone who'd worked or run or both. She moved next to the woodpile. The stack had slumped from last night's wind, but she didn't pause to complain. Just started restacking it log by log, the way a man would build a wall between himself and trouble. Elias didn't say a word, just let her be. She worked hard, not like she wanted to impress, but like she needed to earn her place with every breath. Every kindness she accepted seemed to leave a weight on her back, and this labor, was how she balanced the scale. By noon, she had swept the porch, fed the chickens, and patched a tear in the fence gate with twine from her own pack. She didn't ask to stay, didn't say thank you, but she never sat still. Never let the silence grow thick enough for pity. Elias watched the way she moved, like stillness might break her. Like if she stopped, the thoughts would catch up and pull her under. That evening, he set another bowl beside hers at the table. And when she sat down without asking, he didn't smile, didn't speak, just nodded once. Some folks begged for a place to belong. Others built one with bare hands and refused to leave. She was the second kind. And Elias understood that language just fine. She wasn't snooping. Not really. She'd gone looking for thread in the drawer by the bed, same place he kept extra nails and folded rags. But beneath it all was a single page, yellowed at the edges, folded neat like it hadn't been touched in years. She opened it without meaning to. The ink had faded some. A name sat at the top in strong, square letters. Mara. The words weren't fancy, just plain things. A fence that needed mending, the calf that didn't make it, how quiet the house got after sundown. But there was grief in the way the lines slowed, like every sentence had to be dragged out of something heavier. It wasn't finished. No goodbye, no signature, just a pause where the writer had stopped. Maybe mid-thought, maybe mid-heartbreak, and never gone back. She sat on the edge of the bed and read it twice, not because she was nosy, but because it felt like holding someone else's ache in her hands. A man's ache. Quiet, steady, and buried deep. She folded it back just the way she found it. Tucked it under the rags. Shut the drawer soft, like the wood might cry out. That night, she stirred the stew while he chopped kindling outside. Watched him through the window the way he moved, efficient, spare, alone. When he came in, she didn't say a word about the letter, didn't ask who Mara was, but she served him first. Set his bowl down with both hands, and when she sat across from him, the firelight dancing between them, something in her eyes had changed. Not softened, not quite, but understood. Some grief lives in the walls, some in the drawer, and some across the table still breathing. The mare had gone quiet hours before dawn, her sides heaving, eyes wide and wild. Elias had risen without needing to be asked, moving calm, lantern in hand. She followed him without a word, the hem of her skirt dragging through dew-wet grass. They stood in the dark of the barn, breath fogging in the cold, watching as life fought its way into the world. The foal came out slick and shaking, legs tangled, eyes blinking against the strange light. The mare nudged it gently, then nickered low. Elias stayed back. So did she. It took a while, but then the foal lifted its head. Then a shoulder. Then, impossibly, it pushed up onto trembling legs and stood. She let out the softest sound. Not laughter, not quite. But something caught between surprise and wonder. And then, just for a heartbeat, her lips curved. A smile. It came and went so fast it could have been a trick of the lantern flame. But Elias saw it, clear as morning, and he didn't speak. Didn't ruin it by noticing. She reached through the stall bars, fingers brushing the mare's nose. The foal stumbled toward her, still unsure of its limbs, and she smiled again. Smaller this time, but steady. That smile wasn't for Elias. It wasn't for anyone. It was for something pure, something new, something untouched by whatever had left her so afraid to rest. Later, as they walked back to the cabin in silence, her hands still smelled of hay and birth and warmth. She didn't pull away when their shoulders brushed. And Elias, who'd buried more than he'd ever held, didn't try to hold it. Some smiles aren't meant to last. They're meant to remind you they're still possible. It was dry in town. Dust clung to the railings, the windows, the throats of men who said too much and meant less. Elias was there for salt and nails, nothing more. But at the feed store, he heard it. A voice, too smooth for a place like this, asking questions that didn't belong. Tall man, clean coat, clean boots, the kind that hadn't earned their wear. He leaned on the counter like he owned the floorboards, asking the storekeep if anyone had seen a woman, young, thin, dark hair, scar on her chin. Said she took something that wasn't hers. Said she was trouble, the kind that ran. Elias didn't turn, didn't blink, just paid for his goods and walked out like the name didn't hit his gut like a stone. On the ride back, the prairie stretched quiet. The wind carried nothing but the smell of sage and old grass, but his grip on the reins was tight. When he got home, she was in the back, hanging linens to dry. The sun hit her in slants, and for a second he saw the scar, faint, just below her jaw, like someone once tried to mark her forever. She looked up when he passed, but didn't ask where he'd been. He didn't say. Inside, he poured water into the kettle, set it on the stove. His jaw clenched. Not from fear, from knowing what it meant. To have the past track you like a hound with your scent. That night, he sat by the window, rifle leaning close, shadows stretching long across the floor. She slept just 10 feet away, wrapped in a blanket she didn't ask for. And Elias never once mentioned the man in town. Some truths wait. Others stand guard. The mornings had turned cool again, sharp in the bones. She moved slower now, the way someone does when they're no longer running, but not yet sure how to stay. The chores got done before she was asked. The stew tasted better each night, and the silence between them had settled into something soft instead of sharp. That evening, while she was hauling water from the creek, Elias opened the old cedar chest at the foot of his bed. Dust bloomed as he lifted the lid. Inside were things he hadn't touched in years, quilts stitched by hands long gone, a rusted brooch, a folded shawl, and near the bottom, wrapped in linen, a dress, blue calico, faded but clean. Unworn for a decade. He laid it quiet on the end of her cot. Said nothing. When she came in, she saw it right away. Froze in the doorway, the bucket still in her hand. She didn't touch it at first, just looked at it like it might vanish if she blinked too long. Later, after the stew was gone and the fire burned low, she sat on the cot and ran her fingers over the fabric. Soft, careful, like she was reading a story no one had ever written down. She didn't put it on, didn't try it against her frame, just folded it small and tucked it into her bag, like something saved, like maybe she wasn't ready to wear it, but couldn't bear to leave it behind. Elias watched her from the rocker, said nothing, made no gesture. Sometimes giving is louder than words, and sometimes taking something gentle is the hardest thing of all. She didn't thank him, but that night, she didn't sleep with her boots on. The wind came first, dragging dust and dead leaves across the porch. Then the clouds rolled in, low and heavy, stitched with veins of silver. Elias shut the shutters one by one, same as he always did, but when he turned, she was already there, bringing in the firewood without being asked. By dusk, the rain had started. Not the lashing kind from the night she came, but steady, cold, relentless. It tapped on the roof like fingers that wouldn't leave. She didn't tremble this time, didn't stare at the door like she might have to bolt through it. She just sat cross-legged on the floor by the fire, her knees pulled in, the blue calico dress folded beside her like a promise not yet spoken. Elias poured 2 mugs of coffee, set one beside her. She didn't smile, but her fingers curled around the warmth like they belonged there. Outside, thunder grumbled across the hills. Inside, they said nothing. The flames crackled. Shadows danced along the logs stacked neat in the corner. Elias shifted in his chair, the old wood groaning beneath his weight. She stayed still, eyes flickering with the firelight, face soft in the glow. It wasn't the kind of silence that hurt. It wasn't made of fear or shame, or things unspoken out of survival. It was the kind of silence people earn, the kind that holds. When the thunder rolled louder, she didn't flinch. Her gaze drifted to Elias. He met it, nodded once, then went back to watching the flames. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she leaned slightly his way, not enough to touch, but close enough to feel the heat of more than just fire. Some storms don't bring ruin. Some bring quiet. And the right kind of company. It slipped out quiet one morning as the sun climbed over the ridge and set the field gold. She was hauling water, her braid falling loose over one shoulder, when Elias passed behind her and said, "Careful there, Miss June. That handle's cracked." She paused mid-step. Didn't turn. Didn't breathe. For just a second. Then she nodded, shifted the bucket, and kept walking. He didn't say it again that day, but the name hung there in the air like the scent of smoke after supper. Faint, warm, hard to shake. June. The month the rains came. The month she'd shown up on his porch like a ghost pulled from the mud. He didn't know if that was when she was born, or what she called herself before, or if she'd ever had the chance to choose a name at all. But it fit. There was something green about her now. Not soft, not tame, but growing. The next morning, he left a mug of coffee on the porch and said, "'Fore it gets cold, Miss June." And she took it. Didn't flinch. Didn't correct him. Just drank it slow and watched the prairie stretch toward the horizon. That night, as she folded the quilt over her cot, she whispered the name to herself once. Barely a sound. Not her name. Not the one that man in town might still be searching for. But maybe the name she'd carry going forward. The one that wasn't tied to bruises or escape or fear. Just a month. Just a moment. Given gently and taken without fight. Some names are earned. Others are offered like a second chance. And when he said it the next day, she met his eyes and let it stay. The fog rolled in thick as wool, smothering the valley in silence. Not even the birds stirred. Elias had just stepped out to check the fence line when the shot cracked through the stillness. Sharp, close, not meant for game, meant for warning, or worse. He turned back to the cabin without breaking stride. She was already at the door, barefoot, hair unbraided, eyes wide with something more than fear. "Barn," he said, low and even. "Stay down." She didn't argue, didn't freeze. Just nodded once and slipped through the fog, her figure vanishing like a wisp of smoke into the gray. Elias grabbed the rifle from above the hearth and walked toward the sound like he'd done it 100 times, because he had. War teaches a man how to step into danger without dragging it home behind him. Another shot rang out, closer. He paused near the edge of the clearing, heart steady. Fog shifted, and a figure emerged. A man on horseback, shoulders slumped like he'd been riding all night, rifle slung too loose across his chest. "Turn around," Elias called out. Calm. Cold. The man didn't. Just sat there, squinting through the mist. "Looking for someone," he said. "You found the wrong place." Elias didn't raise the rifle. He didn't have to. The man lingered. Watched the barn like he could see straight through the walls. Then, slowly, he backed the horse around and rode off without another word. Elias waited until the sound of hooves faded, then walked back slow, every step heavy with knowing it wasn't over. She came out of the barn when he whistled. Didn't ask who it was. He didn't say. But that night, he cleaned the rifle extra careful and set it beside the door. It was late. Fire burned low, casting long shadows on the log walls. Rain tapped the windows soft, like it knew not to interrupt what had been building for weeks. She sat on the edge of her cot, hands folded tight in her lap, eyes fixed on nothing. Elias didn't push. Just sat in the rocker, same place as always, boots planted firm, listening to the storm and the silence that followed it. Then she spoke. Voice quiet, Flat. Not broken, just used to not being heard. He hit me the first time the day I told him I was pregnant. Said I'd done it on purpose to keep him. Her thumb traced a scar on her palm, slow and steady. I lost the baby a few months later. Wasn't anyone there but me when it happened. Elias didn't move. I buried the little thing under a tree and didn't mark it. Thought if I didn't name it, it wouldn't hurt so bad. She swallowed hard. It still did. The fire cracked once. I stayed too long, then ran too fast. He said he'd find me. Said there wasn't a place in this world I could hide where he wouldn't take me back. She looked up then, met Elias's eyes across the room. My name isn't June. It's Calla. Calla Grace Monroe. I stopped using it because I didn't think it belonged to me anymore. Elias didn't speak. She looked down again. I don't have people, or a plan, or a future, far as I can see. She waited, chest rising slow. Elias leaned forward, elbows on knees. You've got a place, he said. Just that. And in the hush that followed, her shoulders dropped like someone had finally taken part of the weight. She didn't say anything the next morning, just chopped kindling until her knuckles went raw. Sweat clung to her neck even though the air was cool. Elias watched from the porch, coffee in hand, letting her burn it out however she needed. When she finally stopped, arms shaking, he handed her a cloth and nodded toward the steps. She sat beside him, quiet, fingers tight in her lap. The silence stretched, but not the kind that avoided things. The kind that waited for the truth to settle. I don't need saving, she said, voice low, eyes on the distant hills. I know, he said. I don't want anyone feeling sorry for me. I don't. She glanced sideways, searching him for something. Softness, weakness, expectation. She didn't find it. You're offering something, she said. He nodded. What is it? A home, he said. If you want it. Her breath hitched. Why? He didn't rush, just looked straight ahead. Because you work hard. You keep your word. You fix what's broken without being asked. You belong anywhere you decide to stay. She shook her head, almost laughed. I've got nothing to give back. He finally turned to her. I'm not saving you, he said. I'm giving you something to build. That stopped her. Not protect, not carry, not fix. Building with her own two hands. Her throat worked like she wanted to speak, but no words came. So she stood, walked to the porch rail, and stared out across the land. The fence line they'd mended together, the barn roof she'd patched, the coop she'd reinforced with her own twine. The sky opened wide above it all. She didn't answer. Didn't have to. She was already deciding where to start. The old porch had leaned for years, sagging in the middle like a tired back. Elias had meant to fix it more than once but never found the will. Now, with Calla beside him and spring thick in the air, the boards finally came up. They worked side by side, her sleeves rolled high, his shoulders stiff from the cold mornings. She hammered with the stubbornness of someone who'd never been given anything that lasted. He measured slow, precise, letting her set the pace. The wood creaked beneath their boots, dust rising in soft clouds, and still they kept going. By midday, her palms were red and raw, blisters splitting along old calluses. He offered gloves. She shook her head. I want to feel it, she said. So he let her. They didn't talk much, but when a board slipped and smacked his shin, she laughed. Not a loud sound, just a breathy chuckle, quick and surprised, like it had caught her off guard. He chuckled too, leaning on the railing that wasn't there yet. That laugh hung between them longer than the pain did. The wind stirred, soft and warm, pushing through her hair and carrying the scent of cut wood and new earth. It didn't feel sharp like before. It didn't chase or bite. She stepped back near dusk, brushing sawdust from her skirt, and looked at what they'd done. The boards were straight. The steps didn't creak. It wasn't fancy, but it held. He stood beside her, rubbing his shoulder with a grimace. She smiled, just faintly, and said, I think it'll last. Elias nodded. So do I. They sat on the new steps as the sun dropped low, not touching, not speaking, but both knowing. This porch was theirs now. The first growl of thunder came low and distant, crawling over the hills like an old memory. Elias looked up from the trough he was mending. Calla was already on the porch, arms crossed, eyes on the horizon where the sky had turned the color of bruised bone. He didn't hurry, just finished what he was doing and walked slow toward the house. The air smelled like rain, wet earth and ash, the kind of scent that made a man brace for something. She didn't go inside this time, didn't flinch when the wind picked up or when the trees began to lean, just stood there barefoot on the boards they'd built, chin lifted like she was daring the storm to come. Elias stepped beside her. Close, but not touching. The porch creaked once beneath their weight, then held. She didn't look at him, not right away. When the lightning split the sky, it lit her face in quicksilver. She didn't blink, just reached out. Her hand found his like it had always known where to go. No shaking, no hesitation. And when he felt her fingers thread into his, he didn't let go. The rain came fast, sweeping across the prairie in sheets. It hit the roof hard, but not loud enough to drown out the silence between them. Steady, warm, earned. He squeezed her hand once. She didn't need more than that. Some storms come to tear things down. But this one? This one passed over a house that didn't buckle, over two people who didn't run. They stayed. And when the thunder rolled again, long and low and wild, they stood side by side beneath it, unmoving, unafraid. Because sometimes the loudest storms meet the quietest strength. And lose. The morning came soft, pale light pouring through the windows like it knew it didn't have to wake anyone in a hurry. The rain had passed, the porch was dry, birds were loud in the cottonwoods again. Calla stood in the cabin alone, knife in hand, her breath steady. Elias was out tending the horses like always. She moved to the hearth, the center of everything in that small home, and ran her fingers along the rough beam above it. Her boots were by the door, where she'd left them last night, muddy, worn, settled. She pressed the blade to the wood and carved slow. Each letter took a little more from her hands, but none from her heart. Calla Grace Monroe. No initials. No hiding. When she finished, she stepped back and stared at it for a long while. Her name didn't look borrowed anymore. It didn't shake or vanish. It stayed. Elias came in just as she was folding up her sleeves again. He didn't say anything, not right away, just looked from the knife to the carving, then to her. She met his eyes without flinching. "Thought it was time," she said. He nodded, slow. "I reckon it was." She smiled, small and sure. Then walked past him, set the kettle on the stove, and moved like she knew where everything belonged. Her boots stayed where they were. Not tucked in a pack, not lined for travel, by the door. Waiting only for chores, not escape. Outside, the prairie stretched wide and golden, endless as ever. But for the first time, she didn't look at it like it needed chasing. She had walls now, and within them, a name that held. Not just her past, but her place.